Welcome to Fossil Creek Tree Farm and Nursery. I'm Max. I'll be your garden coach today, and we're going to be talking about shade plants and watering them. They're adapted to shade, and typically they're adapted to less water. Why might that be? Well, if they're adapted to shade, out in the environment, where does that occur? Under trees and big shrubs. Needs less, so you can provide less to make it happy. Don't say to yourself, I would sure need a big drink if I was out there. I'm gonna go give that poor baby a big drink. What you want to do is respond to thirst of the plant, not the plant being in heat. And you know, I could be hot but not be thirsty, or I could be thirsty and not be hot, you know? So those are independent of each other. But the reason I mentioned the plants are adapted to it is they cope with the heat. And if it's a shade plant, it just doesn't need as much water. Some perennials, it'll say like zone 5 to 8, we're 8. And then some of them will say 5 to 9. Well, Houston is like 9. The ones that say 5 to 8, that means they can tolerate a bunch of heat. But if they're not adapted to zone 9, it's not any hotter down there. It's much more humid. And that's what they're not adapted to. So if it says 5-8, they don't want to be soggy. They don't want to be in high humidity. So that's what that zone means. If it says in the zone 9, or if it says zone 10 or 11, that means, man, they can grow on the coast and they're perfectly happy with super high humidity. Humidity plays a part just as water does. If I'm thirsty, that takes care of that. Now, if I was really hot, that's different. And this has been known to happen. If I'm terribly hot, but I'm not thirsty, oh man, that's better. Oh, that's so much better. I'm not hot anymore, and I feel like I just picked up 10 IQ points because I cooled my brain down. So when you're watering shade plants, the other thing is they're not going to need it as often, and they're not going to need as much. You know, a thing like this, it could cope as a house plant. You don't water it as often, and when you do water it, you don't need to super saturate it. The same thing with typically your plants out in shade. When you do water them, wait till they really need it, maybe till they wilt, and then water them, but not a drenching kind of a thing. If you're watering them too much in the humidity, it can be like in the kitchen you're steaming things. If it goes beyond that, if you super saturate the soil, then we get into a term, poached. It's in a bunch of water and it's way too warm, and that can be death to roots. They just can't cope with being really hot and being really wet. If you had a plant like a cuba, it was wilting a little bit, or a fern or something like that, you water it a little bit, give it an hour or so, typically you'll see it perk back up. That means he's good to go, and you can wait until it needs it again. Don't drown plants that are in shade, because you're just trying to get them through. And, in general, in thinking about watering, you know, the things that influence it, shade plants, sun plants, house plants, and that is the things that are going to influence the need for water, the intensity of the light. And that's kind of one of the reasons why the things in the shade, you have to make adjustment for them, because it's a low light intensity. And then the temperature of the environment is going to affect it, because that affects what a plant is doing. Is it dormant? Is it growing fast? You know, is it kind of paused because it's so hot, it's waiting for things to get better before it starts growing? And then also air circulation. You know, if it's outside, You know, if we have some of those days that the wind's blowing 15 to 25 miles an hour, that's definitely going to have an impact on how soon the plants are going to need water. So those are the kind of things that you need to factor in. If we were talking about, say, you know, some perennials, if the temperature is cool and they're not growing that fast, or if it's could possibly get cold, you don't want the soil to be soggy because they could rot. They don't want to be wet when they're relatively dormant. So, you know, factor these things in. That'll do it.